Thanks for this kind introduction. Well, I promise you I'm going to use my frontal cortex still a little bit, but also other parts of my brain. Thanks for inviting me. It's an honor to be here and speak here at Harvard, and especially after such an inspiring speech by Jeremy Rifkin, who I admire for a long time. And today I admire him even more because he actually managed to give us a more than 1 hour speech without mentioning the resignation of President Wolf once. That is really an achievement. And I tell you, I'm not going to mention him either, because I don't know more than you know, and I don't know more than the Twitter community knows. And that is part of the new game that we are actually in, that those who are inside of the loop do not necessarily know much more about what is happening, like anybody else who is interested and has access to the information. I'm invited here to introduce our energy panel and explain a little bit the German energy revolution. Energiewende, I've been told, is in some areas already part of the English language, like Wirtschaftswunder or kindergarten. Energiewende, energy turnaround, energy revolution, I would like to say. Germany is being looked at sometimes suspiciously, sometimes hopefully, but always with a bit of uneasiness. Are they going to make it? And Jeremy Rifkin has just issued a very passionate plea and told us that you must succeed. And I will try to give you some reasons why we are going to succeed, but I will also give you some reasons for concern of why we may fail. First, the reasons to succeed. There's all the best reasons in the world to fight for an energy revolution, and that has been a consensus in Germany for the last 10, 15 years, and that is the phase out of nuclear power. That has united large parts of the German population, and David Lerch has just said it. Generations have grown up with this threat. It is a deadly, a lethal technology that is not controllable, that is providing unbearable risks to the present and unacceptable risks. It's a time bomb for the generations to come, for the next 1,000 generations to come at least. Hundreds of kingdoms, imperiums will come and go, and still the stuff will be there. We don't know which kind of language the people will speak, which kind of organization they will have. They'll have to deal with it, and that is unacceptable. So they have to be switched off, one after the other, all 400 globally, and I'm sure that this is going to happen. Second, we cannot revert to coal to solve our energy problems. Part of the reason is climate change, of course, one of the biggest, or maybe the biggest threat that we face. And we always hear these kind of 2 or 3 degrees, but let's put it in perspective. The IPCC and other institutions talk about a 6 to 7 degrees Celsius rise until the year 2100, but only because the scenarios, the computer models, don't go further than that, but there may be more to come. And if they talk about 6 degrees on average warming, it means for some places of this planet a 12 degrees warming, like in the Arctic, and in other places 8 to 10 degrees. It is a completely different world. And that's why coal is not an option, as some in the fossil industry are planning to do, because potentially, of course, you can liquefy, you can gasify, and you can provide a lot of services coming out of coal, but it has a carbon content that is higher than that of oil and is unacceptable. And third, energy security. Cheap and reliable energy supply for people, democratically distributed. That is a vision that shares us. Other than the threats of nuclear destruction, climate change, the vision of a democratic, dispersed energy provision is something that motivates people. And we in Germany have managed to get the prices of wind energy and solar energy lower than the average price of electricity per megawatt hour in the grid. And thanks to Germany, it's in China that the solar industry has risen and is giving us some hope that it will deliver not only China but also the world with cheap solar panels. It's actually a fact that in Germany the influx of solar and wind power lowers the average price of the grid. It is a fact that the renewable energy sources are stabilizing the grid, and it is also a fact that even after Germany switched off the 7, 8 oldest reactors, Germany is still a net exporter of energy to its neighboring countries, and especially this winter to France, which had a very high energy demand because of heating, is done by electricity, and they couldn't use the full power of their nuclear reactors, which just shows you that the warnings against renewable energy are completely unfounded. On the contrary, it is delivering, and it's delivering cheaply. So there's very much hope. For a couple of years now, we know that 100% supply with renewable energy is possible. Back 20, 30 years ago, it was some lunatics, some madmen, some weirdos that were talking about 100% energy supply with renewables. Now we've got detailed scenarios, we've got computer simulations that tell us that it's possible for each country, region, and for the world as a whole. And I'm very confident that in a very short time, the average prices of energy supplied by renewables, not offshore wind maybe, but onshore wind and solar, is going to beat any other prices of fossil fuels. But there are some dangers, and I'm very grateful for the vision that Mr. Rifkin has presented us here. I'm also very grateful for the positive view of Germany and Europe as a whole. When he published his book on Europe, and I listened to his speech in the Humboldt University in Berlin, I thought to myself, well, no European could have written such a book and given us such a speech. We are too modest for that, and not as inspiring and passionate about it. But it has incited also in us some new passion for Europe, and you're doing it now for this third industrial revolution, which I think is unavoidable and must come. I'm also a member of a parliamentary committee. It's called Enquête Commission. It's a committee on wealth, growth, and quality of life. That's what it's called. And we're actually exploring ways to maintain our level of quality of life. I don't want to say wealth or prosperity. I'd say quality of life, but while at the same time reducing drastically the amount of resources and energy that we use. That is the question for the 21st century. But where are the dangers? Dangers lie with the traditional industries, traditional enterprises that follow the old business model that have been providing good returns for decades now, and which are threatened. You know that on 28th of October 2010, I remember very well, the newly elected government, Christian Democratic Liberal government, extended the lifetime of nuclear power stations. And all of us in the Green faction came completely clad in black with yellow crosses of the anti-nuclear movement, and gave personal declarations of why we fought it. It was a very bleak day. But then came Fukushima. One of the most influential books for me at the moment is The Black Swan, Nassim Nicholas Taleb. Don't know whether you've read it. As the gist, he says, everything, all historical events are unforeseeable in principle. We cannot foresee them, which means the only thing that we can do is to prepare for the unforeseeable. And in this case, it was Fukushima, which shattered the energy industry in Germany, led Chancellor Merkel to shut down the oldest installations, moratorium, and later the renewed phase out in 2000, by the end of 2021. The industry lost the nuclear war, so to speak, in Germany, and they are determined as hell not to lose the Cold War, if I may draw this distinction. That's why they concentrate on ideology. We see a renewed surge of climate skepticism in Germany coming up. The new book by the manager of RWE, Fahrenhold, is just one. There'll be more coming. There's more in the pipeline. And that's why we see concerted efforts, attacks on renewable energy, on the renewable energy law. There's a call to limit, to cap the additional solar energy that's being funded in Germany to 1 gigawatt per year. Actually, last year was 7 gigawatts that was installed on the roofs. These resonate well with the economics ministry. Also, our Minister for Economics, Rösler, has issued this call to cap the amount of solar power, of additional solar power. And it leads to a complete, at the moment, paralysis of the government regarding energy issues. You know that in Brussels, Germany is preventing increasing the goal, the 20% goal, 20% reduction in 2020 from 1990 levels to 30%. At the moment, it's 17%. So if Europe aims at a 20% decrease in emissions until 2020, it's 3% we're talking about. That's business as usual. That's nothing. And it has brought the emissions trading system in Europe down completely. So we need an increase in our ambition to 30%. But since Germany is against it, it is not happening. And I talked to many friends, our colleague Franziska Brandner is here, in Europe, from different parties and factions, and they all say it's Germany that's decisive here. And why is Germany against? Röttgen, our environment minister, is in favor of it. Rösler is against. And Merkel doesn't take sides. And that's why Rösler prevails. And the German voice is niet in Brussels. That's the reason also why there is an almost complete breakdown in the program to improve energy efficiency of buildings in Germany. And Jeremy Rifkin has told us how important that is. 40% of all energy goes into housing. But the funding for homeowners has been cut. And what's more important, it's coming from a source that is depleted now because the price for the certificates, the emissions trading system is down. We are still at a rate of only 0.8% of the housing stock that is being modernized, energy modernized every year. But we need at least 3% to achieve a sizable reduction in our emissions until 2040, 2050. That's also the reason why there's no plans to adapt our energy grid to the decentralized power that we need. And there's nothing at the moment, or very little, to explore the storage facilities that we also need. And there is a danger that the energy revolution is coming to an end, is hitting the wall, so to speak, because of the paralysis of this government. And that's what we must prevent. And I call on you, on everybody, also on Mr. Rifkin, with his good connections, to try to influence decision makers in Germany, not to let this happen. Because, as everybody, I think, in this room is convinced, Germany must succeed. Otherwise, it will be a very bad signal for everybody on this planet. Just last week, I talked about Mr. Hewlett. Mr. Hewlett is the heir of Mr. Walter Hewlett from Hewlett and Packard. And the foundation has assets of about $7.2 billion. And he told me Germany is important. That's why he is also investing in climate policy in Germany, because he said this must not fail. But he's not talking about technologies. He is talking about psychology. He told me everybody is looking at Germany. And that's why this is so important. That's where the battlefield is, and that's why we have to put our resources there. The United States is absent at the moment at the international level. Some states are present, and we're used to that. What we're not used to is the new development that the United States is actually opposing and hindering, trying to hinder Europe in developing its own climate policy. And that's the integration of air traffic into the emissions trading system. You know that there's a kind of tug of war going on. Trade war is being threatened because Europe has actually included the emissions from aircrafts over the ocean that fly from and to Europe into its scheme. The European Court of Justice has decided that this is legally possible. And still, the United States, but also other countries, also India, China, Brazil, you name them, are trying everything they can to move the EU from lessening this integration. And that is a very bad sign. And it is disheartening, really, to see an administration that started with such great hopes. And I also put a lot of hope in it. I was there when Obama came to Berlin at the Siegessäule. 200,000 Berliners came and watched him. To see such an administration moving against Europe in protecting the climate. One question that is always asked to me, beginning of last year, I was invited by the Democrats Abroad. That's the organization of the Democratic Party in the United States, the chapter of Germany. And they had their annual meeting, and I gave a talk. And they asked me, so why is Germany so good in the environmental movement? Why is the anti-nuclear movement so strong? Why is the Green Party so strong? And I was searching while I was talking to them, and there's obviously many reasons. There's some kind of romantic love for nature, although I would contend that, especially in the US context, this is overrated. It is true that there's a romantic love for nature in Germany, but it's not driving policy as much as many critics want to see. There is, of course, Germany is a densely populated country, highly industrialized, but other countries are too, and do not have the same kind of movement. Yesterday I talked to Eike Weber, and he said, well, maybe it's that Germany also wants to make something good that happened in the Second World War during the Nazi dictatorship. Also possible. My own explanation that I found while I was talking to the Democrats was, after the war, there was a generation grew up, which are known now as the generation of '68 in Germany. And they asked their parents, what have you done during the Nazi era? And some of them had committed deeds. I mean, this was clear. I know people who didn't talk to their parents for decades because of what they'd done. Most parents were what we call Mitläufer. They just followed and didn't do anything. And then the generation of their children asked, so why didn't you do anything? Why did you let this happen? And that has formed a generation, and it's forming generation still. It's influenced me, it's influenced still my kids. The lesson is, if something goes wrong, don't be quiet. Shout, act, do something. Because otherwise, your children will ask you one day, why didn't you do anything about it? And that is a very, very strong feeling. And even if it's only 10% of the population, it can move a whole society. I think that's a sign for hope. It doesn't need big majorities. Sometimes it takes special people. Sometimes it takes small groups of people. Most of what we do in Germany has been invented in the United States. And I mean not only technology, I mean also social innovations. That was in the 60s and 80s in California, where new technologies and social techniques were invented. We are using them. They've been exported quite successfully. So it makes sense to do what everybody can do. And I would like to end because I'm at Harvard. I'm talking to many young people. I'm talking to many hopefuls. Get involved. Sometimes I tell, when I talk to school kids, I tell them, well, you will not like that, but homework is important. If you clean your room or your house and you leave it like that for 4 weeks, it will be a mess. It will be a dump site. Or as we say in Germany, like Unterhempel Sofa. So it's important to continually do something, clean, mend, care. And in politics, it's the same. You can have a good constitution. You can have a wonderful system. But if you don't mend it, if you don't care for it, then it goes down the drain. And which means it's important that everybody is interested in what's happening, is trying to take influence in what's happening, locally, but also all the representatives who do politics in Boston, Washington, or wherever. Thank you.
We heard the plan, and now we're going to talk a bit about, is the mic working?
Where'd you like us?
We'll just sit down.
Anywhere. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Excuse me. That was
Okay, let's start this again.
Thank you.
Can you hear me? No. Okay.
Now it's starting.
Now it's starting?